reminding me that. So okay, so why Bechlal do we have Eretz Yisrael? So the answer is, and it's similar to that, but it's deeper than just that we have a place that guarantees our physical security. Because again, what's the entire point of our physical security? The real point of why Hashem gave us Eretz Yisrael was so that we should be able to engage in Avodas Hashem with Menuchas HaNefesh. That we have a mission in the world, that we have a mission to accomplish, and that the only way that we can truly serve Hashem when we are without the difficulties and the stress and the agmas nefesh of being chased from one country to another country, of persecutions and of exiles, which obviously it's very difficult to serve Hashem in that context, as we have seen throughout our history. So Hashem gives us a land where we have a sense of security, where we could serve Him, as the entire point of Yetzias Mitzrayim, as Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu. The entire point of Yetzias Mitzrayim was to serve Hashem on Har Sinai, was to be makabel the Torah, was to receive the Torah. So similarly, the entire purpose of giving us Eretz Yisrael was so that we should be able to engage in Avodas Hashem with Menuchas HaNefesh, with tranquility, with stability, and in that way enhance our capacity in Avodas Hashem, to serve Hashem in the best way possible, in the best manner possible. But there's a downside to that also. And the downside, what could possibly be the downside to stability and tranquility? Well, we don't have to guess. All we have to do is look in Tanakh. And especially in the period of the Shoftim, when if you look, and we mentioned this before, but if you look throughout the Sefer Shoftim and Sefer Malachim and Sefer Shmuel, you see a certain pattern that happens to Klal Yisrael, that they're persecuted by their enemies, they're tormented and murdered and persecuted, etc. And then they do tshuva, and Hashem strengthens them, and they defeat their enemies, and they're able to live with tranquility and stability. But the moment they have tranquility and stability, they go back to their old patterns of behavior. There becomes a certain complacency when we have stability and tranquility in our own Avodas Hashem. We get used to and we take for granted that this is how it is. And this has been our history for the thousands of years. That whenever we have stability and tranquility, we leave our Avodas Hashem. It's fascinating, but in the war with the Tsar and Napoleon, where Napoleon was promising, religious liberty to the Jewish people, and they were suffering under the Tsar. The Alter Rebbe, the
Rabbi,
first
we can't
Rebbe
hear you.
at that time, sided with the Tsar. And it's a question: how could the Alter Rebbe side with the Tsar? The Tsar was a horrific anti-Semite who persecuted Klal Yisrael, persecuted the Jewish people, and Napoleon was promising religious liberty. And the Alter Rebbe felt that Klal Yisrael would remain Klal Yisrael under the Tsar much more than they would under Napoleon, that they would assimilate under Napoleon and lose their identity. And so Hashem gives us, on one hand, Hashem gives us Eretz Yisrael to give us Menuchas HaNefesh, to give us stability, to give us tranquility in our Avodas Hashem. But the downside with that is we stop appreciating it. And we stop turning to Hashem. And we can relate to this in our own lives. Yeah. But even putting that aside, just in our own lives, when do we turn to Hashem? And when do we raise our hands and say, Hashem, I need you? Is it when things are stable and tranquil? No, for most of us. We turn to Hashem in times of tsar, in times of pain, in times of difficulty. And then we say, Hashem, I need you. Tzaddikim have this as well. The Lubavitcher Rebbe used to say all the time, everybody comes to me in times of tsar. But nobody comes to me to report good news, the Rebbe said. And he asked people to come to him and tell him good news. And we're the same way with Hashem. We turn to Hashem in times of, in my own life, and I can relate to this so much in my own life. I know when times are going tough, that's when I turn to Hashem. Do I turn to Hashem on a daily basis when things are stable and tranquil and say, thank you, Hashem, for making everything stable and tranquil? And maybe to a certain extent we do, but certainly not with the same passion and not with the same urgency. But we should. Why not? Why don't we? But the reality is, it's just human nature. When things are stable and tranquil, we take that for granted. It's just human nature. And so therefore, Hashem injected into the stability and tranquility of Eretz Yisrael a level of non-stability. And that is this pasuk in our Parsha. That yes, you have stability and tranquility, but the land isn't yours. You don't own it forever. You're only a temporary dweller on the land, so to speak. The land comes back to me. And so therefore, and that gives us sort of this concept that it's not ours. We're temporary renters here on this land. The land really belongs to Hashem. And when you're a renter, there are certain rules that you have to oblige by in order to stay in the property. So similarly, this gives us at least a hakara, an acknowledgement in our own minds that I can't become complacent because I'm only temporarily here. And so this is how the pasuk ends. This is what the pasuk means. Ki gerim v'toshavim imadi. You are both gerim and toshavim. On one hand, Hashem gives us Eretz Yisrael, so we're toshavim, so we have stability and tranquility. But on the other hand, he doesn't give it to us permanently. He gives it to us temporarily. It belongs to him ultimately. And in that sense, we're a ger. So in other words, and the point is that we need both. We need stability and tranquility. But on the other hand, we can't become complacent in our Avodas Hashem. We have to constantly appreciate the mitzvahs, constantly appreciate the Torah that we're doing, because and again, this is human nature. That even those who are shomer Torah and mitzvahs and yiras shamayim and shleimim, how many of us become complacent in our observance? How many of us just observe habitually, ritually? Because this is what we do. This is our pattern of behavior. And with stability comes a certain loss of passion. With complacency comes a certain loss of passion. So you need both in Yiddishkeit. We need to be the toshav. We need that to have a security and tranquility, but we also need to be the ger in the sense that we need to remember that we can't become complacent and we have to serve Hashem with passion. And this is what that pasuk, this is the underlying message of that pasuk. And I think this is the message for Kabbalah Satorah. So if we look at this and we go a little bit deeper, there's one of the great early, maybe not early, one of the great Hasidic masters of the 20th, 19th, and 20th centuries is the Shem Shmuel, Rabbi Shmuel Bornstein, who was the second Sachachav Rebbe. And he lived in the end of the 1800s, beginning of the 1900s. And he has a 9-volume classic work, Shem Shmuel, on the Torah and the Yom Tovim, and on Jewish thought and Hasidic ideology. And it's a beautiful, beautiful sefer. And he explains there a fascinating explanation about a halacha in Gemara. And the Gemara says, the Gemara Masechta Shabbos says, and it speaks about Shabbos candles and the importance of lighting Shabbos candles. And the Gemara says, Haragil b'ner, we once brought this quote in the previous year, Haragil b'ner, havin le'banim talmidei chachamim. And the simple pshat is that somebody who is ragil b'ner, somebody who consistently lights Shabbos candles, somebody who lights Shabbos and Yom Tov candles every week and every Yom Tov, havin le'banim talmidei chachamim, will have children who are Torah scholars. And that's it. That's what the Gemara says. But what's the connection? Why is Haraga B'ner, why is Shabbos candles connected to having children who are Talmidei Chachamim? And how does that work? Why? Why does it work and how does it work? What does that mean even? So he gives a fascinating explanation. And he says as follows. He says that as much as we educate our children, as much as we speak to our children about the importance of mitzvahs and the importance of learning and proper behavior, etc., he says the greatest chinuch for a child is the way the parent behaves. And I've said this before, that a parent's greatest lecture is the way they live their lives. Because as much as we lecture our children, ultimately, our children watch the way we live. And there's a reason why, if you look throughout, I mean, the Shem Shmuel doesn't bring this one point, but I've brought it previously, that if you look throughout Sefer Bereshis, it's fascinating the relationship between the Avos and Imais and their children. And we see, I mean, Avram Avinu waited 100 years to have a child. Sarah Imenu waited 90 years to have a child. And they wanted a child for one reason. They wanted a child because they introduced this concept of ethical monotheism to the world, the concept of what would ultimately become Judaism to the world, Torah and mitzvahs to the world. But as Avram Avinu tells Hashem, what's it all worth if it's going to die with us? If we cannot pass this down to the next generation, then what's the whole point? What is it all worth? And when Hashem tells Avram Avinu that I'm going to give you Eretz Yisrael, Avram Avinu says the same thing. What is it worth? How do I know I'm going to inherit it? And so, obviously, we understand that once Yitzchak was of the age of education, there must have been how much Torah and how many conversations that they must have had together about Torah, about Hashem, about Yiddishkeit, about ethical monotheism, about changing the world, about human beings, about our relationship with the world. And yet, in the entire Chamishi Chumshi Torah, how many conversations does the Torah record between Avram and Yitzchak? One conversation. And that's by the Akedah. So, okay, well, how about the Jewish mother? Certainly the Jewish mother speaks to her only son for a multitude of conversations. So how many conversations does the Torah record between Sarah, Imenu, and Yitzchak? And the answer is 0. 0. Necham, can you do me a favor? Rivki's trying to get into the kitchen right now. Can you just call her, give her the combination? I don't know. 578412. Okay, so how many conversations did Sarah Imenu have with Yitzchak? None. So how do we understand that? How does that make any sense? Why does the Torah record no conversations between the Avos and Imais and their children? And if you go to the next generation, it's very similar. If you go to the next generation, Yitzchak and Rivka, how many conversations do they have with Yaakov Avinu? A little more, but very little. And primarily the conversation with Rivka and Yaakov is about taking the brachas. And with Yitzchak, it's about going off and finding a wife. But we don't see that they have conversations transmitting the Masorah, transmitting the lessons that Avram learned from Hashem, that he passed down to Yitzchak, that Yitzchak certainly passes down to Yaakov. We don't see that. Why not? Because we learn from the Torah not only what the Torah tells us, but also what the Torah omits is also a lesson for us. The fact that the Torah omits the conversations is a lesson in and of itself. The Torah is teaching us that a parent's greatest lesson is not via a lecture. It's the way they live their lives. And I say this from the pulpit also. Rabbis give shiurim and rabbis give lectures, but a rabbi's greatest shiur and lecture is the way that he lives his life. And so, going back to the Shem Shmuel, He says that when a parent wants to inspire a child, the way to inspire that child is not simply through lectures, but be a living example of everything you want your children to be, to grow to be. I remember a story a father in Yechidus brought his child to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. His child wasn't doing well in school, and his child wasn't very into learning, and his child wasn't learning every day, and it brought the father a tremendous amount of aggravation. And so they went to the Rebbe, and he figures the Rebbe will inspire his child. The Rebbe will inject into his child a message, a certain amount of ruchnius, that his child will become inspired. And so he tells the Rebbe that my child's not learning, and he has no cheshik in learning. And the Rebbe asked one question. And the Rebbe asked him, how often does he see his father learning? That's it. That's the answer. How often does he see his father learning? And not just learning, but learning with a passion and learning with the Shavuos. And do our children see within us the joy of Yiddishkeit? How much we love mitzvahs? Or do they get from us that it's a yuck, that it's a burden? Moshe Feinstein said that, and somebody asked him, why is it that this generation is the generation of American Jews are so assimilating, as opposed to the generation that came from the old country, still remaining somehow connected to the roots, and the American generation, those kids that are born in America, are assimilating. And Moshe gave a fascinating answer. He said, those that are coming from Europe often have an expression. This is schwer zu sein a Yid, which in Yiddish means it's difficult to be a Jew. And Moshe said, American Jews, American children don't want difficult. They have a choice. And if they're going to choose, they're not going to choose difficult. So if your chinuch to them is schwer zu sein a Yid, that it's hard to be a Jew and it's difficult to be a Jew, which we understand in Europe that it was. And we understand the thought process behind that. It was schwer zu sein a Yid. But that can't be the sole chinuch to our children. The chinuch to our children, it has to be, it's geschmack. It's pleasurable. It's the greatest merit. It's the greatest schus to be able to do a mitzvah. It's the greatest joy. It's the source of my incredible happiness. I once told the story of my colleague, Dov Greenberg, Rabbi Dov Greenberg, who's the shliach in Stanford. I told this story, and some of you probably have heard that story before, but I love this story. He and his wife, they're on campus, and they, when you're a Chabad on campus, that is an incredible shlichus. Those campus rabbis are amazing. The things that they do, they have their Friday night meals are hundreds of kids. And I remember we were on campus our first shlichus. We were at University of Miami, and those kids are morning, noon, and night, knocking on your door, calling. It's not like having a community. Having a community. Campus shlichus has its own unique. You have to be those shluchim are incredibly dedicated. And Dov Greenberg and his wife, they're successful. They're incredibly dedicated. They have hundreds of students every Friday night, and their whole lives, both of them are dedicated to bringing Jews closer to Yiddishkeit, etc. And he once asked his children that, I forgot what was the question that he asked. What is it that what do you think the mommy and tati mommy and tati are most passionate about? What do you think means the most to us? And they were expecting the kids to say Avos Yisrael, or learning Torah, or bringing Jews closer to Yiddishkeit. And the answer the kids gave, he said, was transforming for him. He said the kids answered him, the thing that's most important to mommy and tati, don't eat in the living room. That's what the kids answered. And what he got from there was, he was taken aback by it. He wasn't expecting that answer. But what he got from there was, that's where his kids saw the passion. They eat in the living room. Don't eat in the living room. Don't bring your chocolate milk into the living room. You're going to stay in the white couch, or whatever it may be. Whereas kids saw their passion, that's where the kids learned. That's what means the most to them. And so same thing says the Shem Mishmul. When it comes to educating our children, where do our children see our passion? Where do our children see our chayas? So the way to educate our children is be consistent in our observance. If our children see 1 week we're going to shul, 1 week we're not, 1 week we're keeping Shabbos, 1 week we're not, 1 week we're careful with kosher, 1 week we're not, depending on the circumstances, that gives a confusing message. So on one hand, the children need to see consistency, but on the other hand, they also you don't want your children to see this as just habitual and robotic, because if it doesn't have meaning and meaning to you, and it doesn't bring passion to you, then it's certainly not going to your children. So we need to have the combination of consistency and passion and in our observance. And in that way, that our children see that, and that sort of seeps into their consciousness as well. And so says the Shem Mishmul, there's a halacha in the Gemara that, of course, if you carry outside, if you take from the Rishus HaRabim, the Rishus HaYachid, you take from a private domain a house, and you carry something outside on Shabbos into the public domain, you're chayiv, you're liable for transferring on Shabbos from the private domain to the public domain. But the Gemara says, Hameitzi shalaheves l'Rishus HaRabim, somebody who carries a flame out to the Rishus HaRabim. He carries a flame. The flame has a wick on it also, but the wick is subordinate to the flame. His intention is the flame. So he's carrying the flame in the Rishus HaRabim. Says the Gemara, he's patur. Patur. Why patur for carrying a flame? So he says, fascinating, the underlying reason behind it. The Gemara explains it as well. And the Gemara explains that in order to be liable for transferring on Shabbos from private domain to public domain, from house to the street, you have to do three things. You have to do what's called an akira. You have to lift the object up from the private domain, transfer it to the public domain, and then set it down, in the public domain, which is the hanacha. So you have the akira, you're picking it up, and then you have the hanacha, you're putting it down. Once you do that, you've picked it up, transferred it, and put it down. It's called akira, havara, hanacha. You're liable. But he says, so says the Shem Mishmul, the flame is unique, because every second that flame is recreating itself. It's burning a new part of the wick, and you'll see the flame is constantly moving and constantly changing. The flame never stays the exact same shape. It's constantly renewing itself and creating a new flame, so to speak. So the flame that exists this second is an entirely new flame that didn't exist last second. It's in an entirely new shape. It's burning an entirely new part of the wick, etc. It's a brand new flame. So therefore, the reason why you're patur for carrying and transferring it on Shabbos is the flame that you put down in the street is not the same flame that you picked up in the house. It's a brand new flame. So the flame is constantly renewing itself. So therefore, says the Shem Mishmul, let's go back to our Gemara. Haragel bener. Haragel bener doesn't simply mean lighting Shabbos candles. Haragel means somebody who does his mitzvahs consistently with regilas. He's ragel, he's consistent. Bener, but he's not just consistent in a way that it becomes habitual and robotic and meaningless. But he's ragel bener in a way like a flame, that he's constantly renewing his observance, that every single moment there's a ischachus, there's a renewal. So he's ragel, and he's doing it in a manner of bener, like a flame, that he's constantly renewing his avodah. He's constantly passionate. There's a new ischachus, there's a new excitement. Then that's the recipe. To have children who are shomer Torah and mitzvahs. That's the best recipe to pass down Yiddishkeit. Listen, Yiddishkeit can be passed down. You have children who are observant whose parents are not. But the best, most consistent way to pass down Yiddishkeit is haragel bener, to combine them both. Have consistency and have hischadshus, have renewal, have passion as well. And this is the pasuk in our parsha. This is what the pasuk is teaching us. You cannot sell Eretz Yisrael permanently. You have it, so you have consistency. You have consistency. You have tranquility. But you have toshavim. But at the same time, you're gerim. You're only sojourning there. You're only temporarily there. Ultimately, kili kala aretz, kilia aretz, the land belongs to Hashem, and therefore, if we don't observe the rules of the landlord throws us out. So in that sense, we have to constantly have that passion and that excitement and that vivifying element of our Yiddishkeit. That's how we're meant to prepare for Shavuos. This is be haragil bener, be toshavim v'gerim. In other words, look inside our own observance and make a cheshbon and nefesh. There are certain areas in our own observance that we have to be more consistent in. At the same time, together with, we have to be more toshavim. We have to have that consistency. And at the same time, we have to have gerim. We have to be gerim. We have to recognize that we have to be passionate. We have to have excitement. We have to have ischachos. We can't just be consistently robotic. But our Yiddishkeit has to be with a passion as well. So as we're preparing ourselves for Shavuos, these are the two areas Behar Bechukosai is telling us that we have to work on: our consistency and our passion. And this is connected to Parshas Bechukosai as well. In Parshas Bechukosai, I'm going to. I said somebody said I got frozen. Am I still frozen? Oh no, I hope not. Somebody said I was frozen on the chat. I don't know why. I hope I'm not so frozen. So I'm going to share the screen. And I want to share with you in the Teichacha, in Parshas Bechukosai. We see something very fascinating in the Teichacha. Let's see. Oh, that was a while ago. Okay, I unfroze. Thank you. Okay, so if we look in the Teichacha, and Hashem mentions this expression, a very odd expression, multiple times leading up to the Teichacha, that this is what will happen. So Hashem says, look in Pasuk 21, Chaf Aleph. This is in Perek Chavav, Pasuk Chaf Aleph. So Hashem says, Im telchu imi bekeri. Im telchu imi keri. Right? Im telchu imi keri. If you'll treat me, if you'll walk with me in the manner of keri. What is keri? It's a strange word. It's not a regular Hebrew word. And all the commentaries sort of trying to define what is keri. But what's interesting is, look in Pasuk Chav Gimel. V'halachtem imi keri. And if you continue to walk with me in a way of keri. And then, look at Pasuk Chav Zayin. A third time. V'halachtem imi bekeri. If you'll walk with me in a manner of keri. 3 different times. Hashem says this, that the Teichacha will come. All these curses will come. If you walk with me in a manner of keri, kuf reish yud. What is keri? Why is it so important? What are we trying to avoid that it's so important that Hashem repeats it 3 different times? So there's 2 explanations of keri. I mean, there's multitude, but here's 2 of them. One is Lashon Mikra. Mikra means, as Rashi, this is what Rashi says, Mikra means happenstance. Like Mikra, like it happens. Like it happens. It just happened to be Mikra, it happened to be. Meaning that you serve Hashem, says Rashi, Lashon Arai, not consistently, temporarily, when it's convenient. When you happen to be able to do a mitzvah, then you do the mitzvah. But there's no consistency there. You're temporary. You're doing it temporarily as it's convenient. Lashon Mikra, that's what keri means. So Hashem says, if you're not going to be consistent with the mitzvahs, or you're only doing them keri as they come to you, as they happen to come to you, then that ultimately will bring about the Teichacha. Another explanation of keri is Lashon Asher Karcha B'derech, Krirus, with a coldness, with a lack of passion. You do the mitzvahs habitually. So then that will bring the Teichacha. And they're both true. But what's fascinating is the language of keri, meaning mikra, meaning temporary, that's the opposite of consistent. And the explanation that keri means krirus, coldness, that's the opposite of passion. So what is Hashem telling us in the Teichacha? The exact same message that he's giving us with this, that you can't sell the land permanently. Ki liya aretz, why? Ki gerim v'toishav v'mimadi. You need to have both Gerim and Toshavim. You need to have consistency and passion. And that's why 3 different times before the Teichacha, Hashem says, if you'll serve me Bekeri, if you'll serve me with coldness, or if you serve me just temporarily without consistency. And so this is obviously, if the same message is in Behar and Bechukosai, this is the message that we need to instill within ourselves. This is the message that Hashem is giving us before Kabbalah Torah. This is the message for every one of us. Let's look inside ourselves and prepare ourselves for Shavuos and see, where can I be more consistent? Yes, I daven every day. Yes, I'm Shomer Shabbos and I'm Shomer Kashrus. But am I consistent with my Bein Adam L'Chavero? Am I consistent with my tzedakah? Am I consistent with my only speaking good about people? In every area in our lives, there's areas that we could enhance our consistency. But it's not only enough to enhance our consistency, being Toshvim. We have to enhance our kigerim, we have to enhance our passion, and we have to enhance our excitement, and we have to enhance the excitement that we have, and the feeling that we have, and the kavanah that we have when we're doing mitzvahs, and remind ourselves not to become complacent, and to remind ourselves what an incredible gift that we have, that every mitzvah that we have, the entire Kabbalah Torah, is Hashem giving us channels of connection to Him. This is an incredible gift. But we can't just sleepwalk through our preparations to Shavuos, and we can't just sleepwalk through Shavuos. So Parshas Behar Bechukosai comes to wake us up and to arouse us, to be Gerim and Toshavim, to be consistent and to be passionate in our Avodas Hashem. And in Mirtz Hashem, when we're consistent and when we're passionate, when we take the lesson of Behar, and we take the lesson of Halachtem Imi Keri, and we take the message of over and over again, this, if you walk with me with Keri in the Teichacha, and we serve Hashem consistently and passionately, then we'll Mirtz Hashem prepare ourselves properly for Kabbalah Torah, and we'll be Zeicha not only to Kabbalah Torah on Shavuos, but the Torah Chadashim Iti Teitze with Mashiach Tzidkenu B'mheir V'Yameinu. Amen. Okay, let us do Tehillim 121 just to conclude in the schus of our IDF and our hostages. May they be released soon, and may all Klal Yisrael be safe and secure wherever they are. 121. Shir lama loy sesenai hari miyayin yavoy Ezri mi madinei ois shemayim v'aretz ayitin raglecha yanim shemrecha hinil yanim v'yishan shemer Yisrael Adonai shemrecha noitzilcha yad yaminecha yema meshemesh leikacha v'yireach b'layla Adonai yishmarcha mikara yishmer es nafshecha Adonai yishmer tzescha v'yecha mi'ata v'yad olam. Thank you so much, everybody. We'll have another shiur next week in Mirtz Hashem for Shavuos, and then following that, we obviously don't have the week of Shavuos, and we'll join up again after Shavuos. So we'll see everybody next week.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, and thank you. Susan left a note. Rabbi, I love the lesson about the action of transfer. Thank you. 1 second. It's very timely. Does this bring us to the topic? Yes, it definitely is connected to Gimel Thomas, Susan. Thank you so much for mentioning that. Absolutely. Thank you. Take care, everybody. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you.
Thank you.